Thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Parveen and I work at University of Sheffield and Doncaster and Bassett Law Teaching Hospitals as Professor of Nursing and Professor of Gender-Based Violence. So we do these sessions every month about writing for publications, and the idea is to develop capacity among nurses, midwives, and allied health professionals and any medical professionals basically to be able to learn more about research, how to do research, how to get published, and so on and so forth. So welcome you all on this session. If you haven't already, please do take some time to introduce yourself into the chat box and see who you are and what do you expect from the session. Are there any specific things that you would like to learn more about? So these sessions, myself and Sarah usually do it depending on what the topic is. So each one takes lead, and today Sarah going to talk about how to search, how to select journal articles, journals where you publish, and how do you choose journals to publish in. So you all are muted, so that means that you will not be able to unmute yourself, and that basically is because people they don't realize they've unmuted themselves and everybody else is hearing the background noise. So I've done that, but while we are having a chat or we are having the discussion, what you could do is if you've got any questions, you can keep adding that into the chat box or keep writing to yourself, and we will be able to take the questions and give some answers or have or talk kind of more freely with each other, if that's okay. So I will stop, and Sarah, it's up to you. Apologies, you will have to introduce yourself again because it wasn't recorded. Thank you.
No, that's fine. I'm Sarah Gardner. I'm the Clinical Outreach Librarian for Doncaster and Bassett Law Hospitals, and I've been working with Parveen on this series of workshops. So this one is going to be a practical demonstration. What I'd really hope is that if you have the facility, you'll be able to sort of play along, if you like, and I'll give you some instructions and some links into chat, and you can follow along with some of the tools that I'm going to show you. And then you'll have the video if you want to look back and pick up the things that that you missed out at the time. So we're going to look at models of publishing. And how that might impact on the choice of journals that you make, how to search for journals if you have something that you want to publish, and how you would evaluate a journal title to make sure that they're legitimate and that it is a good plan for you to publish in that journal. So Parveen and I are going to share a few of the slides, and then I'm going to do the practical bits, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. So hopefully we will be able to mine the deep knowledge that Parveen has about the publishing process, and I'll just bob around in the background for that bit. Okay, so let's have a look at the first slide and see. So Parveen, do you want to go over this, or shall I give some brief notes and then you'll supplement? How would you like to do that?
Yeah, whatever is easiest. So I can talk about this. So when it comes to talking about different models of publishing, there are various ways this is defined or people talk about this. So one is according to the cost, or you may also have heard about the aspects of open access publishing, and many people actually want to do open access publishing. And one of the questions that many people ask all the time is, how do I the journal is asking too much money, so where do I find the money to be able to pay for the publication cost? But just to remember that this is one way of publishing. It's not the only way of publishing, and you don't really have to pay for publishing to get your manuscripts or get your work published somewhere. So various different models that work is subscription cost of publications. Publishing are usually covered by to understand that how do the publication scheme work. So we write it for journals. Journals then supply that information or the journal subscription to various universities and institutions, healthcare institutions, who then pay them a fees depending on how many people they are using the journals into their institutions, and that's how journals usually run. So the authors who write do not really get any money from it. Most of the all peer reviews do not get any money at all. There are some kind of journals which have now started a little bit, but still is not peer reviewers, authors, editors. They don't really get anything in terms of the money from the journals. Editors, as now the cost is increasing, especially editor-in-chiefs and stuff, because their work involves quite a lot in terms of organizing and working and developing the guidelines and everything else. They may get some honorarium, but that nowhere enough with the amount of work that people do. So this is first thing that needs to understand. So usually people who make money from the publication is usually publishers. Then you have different models of publishing. One is like, for example, open access. So which means the cost of publishing, which means that, you know, when they pay for the copy editors to write down the stuff, the way it looks into the journal, the way it appears when you read a journal article, what makes the journal article look like a journal article, and all that works that goes behind it. All that cost is bared by or retained by the authors. Now, there are different ways of doing it. So when people do research studies and when they are bidding for research funding, at that time, people cost that money into those bids and say, well, at the end of the project, we're going to have 2 publications or 3 publications, and this is how much it will cost, and we will have that. And that's how people pay for it. The other thing is some institutions would have subscription, which allows them to cover the cost of the open access publishing. What it means that once the article is published, it is freely available to readers, and readers will not be charged for the article. They're freely able to access on any of the Google or Google Scholar or any of the engines. And I think the idea behind is, and why people like this so much, is that people can get access to the information which is already published. So which means that it improves citations, it improves the use of the work by the author. So that's why usually people prefer this option a lot. Having said that, this is not the only option to make your work publishable or to make your work open access, I should say. There are other ways of doing it, and those are the ways. One involves having your pre-published version. So it's the version that you have in the Word format that you have written. It's not formatted into the journal article. So you cannot download a journal article and paste it on your ResearchGate or any of the other accounts, but it's the version that was accepted. Once your article is accepted, so you've written in the Word and every information is there. And now the only change is going to happen is about copy editing and putting it into the format of the article, how it looks into the journal. So you could put that pre-print version on your ResearchGate. There is academia a website. There are other pre-print servers where you could add them in. There are different repositories which universities have developed. So for example, my university has got White Rose repository. So you can submit your work in that repository, which then means that people are able to access that work free of cost. And the only difference between that paper and the one published in the journal is that they just don't look the same, but the content is pretty much, content is same. When I say pretty much same, that there may be small little copy editing at the time of editing, and that may not be picked up into the Word version that you have, but otherwise it's all citable and everything else is there. In the past about 4 or 5 years, pretty much during COVID and so, there has been a very much popularity of the preprint servers have increased. So you see names like MedRivix or ResearchGate and Research Square. These are some of the places where what people do is they publish their article before if it is even peer reviewed or before it even appears in any of the journals or go through the peer review process in the journal. Now, there is a lot of confusion around that model. Many editors of many journals still don't like it because what happens that once you submit your manuscript into a journal, it goes through a similarity checking system. And what then happens that it picks up a lot of similarity, because if somebody has already put their article into a preprint server, so it matches you with your own work. So, and that shows it as a plagiarism. So that's one concern. The other concerns editor usually has is that if the information is already available on a preprint servers, what is the point of being bothered about going through the whole thing of review process and everything else? Why should we do it? It is plagiarism. The third point, which they usually say, is about quality, that the article is just written up. It's not gone through the peer review process. So therefore, it's not good science, and nobody has had the chance to provide feedback on that. When this thing was developed, the idea was when somebody is going to publish, people will be able to provide feedback on what is written. So peer review would be done in that kind of way. There are various ways peer review is done, various forms of peer review. But if you really look at it, people usually only feedback if they have got really negative feedback about. So constructive information about a particular a piece of writing is usually very less available. So it's not really working in that way. But what it is working as is that the information is already available on preprint version. People are able to read that information and give some feedback about it, or people are able to use that information into their work. It usually has a DOI as well. So it looks like a journal article, and it gets to people much more quickly. And, for instance, if you submit to a journal, it usually takes about a year, 1 year at least. A minimum of 8 months, 10 months, and 1 year, or even sometimes even longer than that, when the article gets published. Where submitting to a preprint server means that you have got that information earlier on. It already says that it's not peer reviewed as yet, so people know that it's not peer reviewed, and it is in the system of the peer review thing. And once you get your article accepted in any journal, then you go back into your preprint server and you add that there, that now the article is published, and you perhaps are also able to make some of the changes that you need to make, and both versions are then available. A lot of work is being done around increasing the acceptability by the authors, by the editors and other people, to make sure that they don't class it as plagiarism, and they understand that it's acceptable. It's getting there, but when it comes to a lot of healthcare journals, nursing journals, we still have got quite a lot of issues around that. So you might see that when you've submitted something somewhere, the editor might get back to you and say, well, this has already been published in a preprint server, so we are not going to publish it. So here it is important that you have a look at the publishing authors guidelines before you send it to them, and make sure that if the journal that if you're interested in publishing on preprint servers, then you choose the journals which accept publishing in preprint journals, and they don't have a problem with that. The other thing which gets published into these places is unpublished papers. For example, your thesis. Usually masters and PhD theses are usually also available on university website from whatever university you've done, and converting that into a journal article is not classed as plagiarism. The reason for this is that usually it's a very different piece of work, and as long as you've clearly articulated it, that this is taken from that particular thesis, and people can clearly see how that relates to you, it's usually is fine. Okay, so that's where it is. So one of the things that you could do is you could ask the editor to say, would you be happy to accept a manuscript which is already available on a preprint servers, or choose journals which already do that. Then you have, so there are some journals which are complete open access. So for example, if you look at within the nursing disciplines, Nursing Open, for instance, is complete open access and online journals, which means you don't get any physical copies unless you print it, and it's just there, and it's open to everybody. Okay, then you have other journals which are subscription journals, which has, as I said earlier, the organizations and readers pay for the what they're getting to read. And that's how the whole thing works, and you will not be able to get access to a specific article if you haven't paid for it, or if it's not been subscribed by the university or institution where you're working. Then and they only publish that kind of subscription model. Then the third is the hybrid model, which is very common these days, which means that journals are publishing the subscription only articles as well as the open access articles as well. So if you have got the ability to pay, it is there in your funding bid or somewhere, then you can opt for the payment sort of model, which means that your article will be open access and freely available to any of the readers, and you bear the cost of it. But many other articles in the same journals will not be freely available and will only be available through prescriptions. So that's kind of, various different journals. Then you would hear quite a lot of information or quite a lot of discussions about pseudo predatory journals, which basically, as the name calls, that means that these are not real science-based journals. These are fake journals. Now, there's a lot of ethical discussions around it, that what makes a journal fake? Why do we say it is fake? Is it just because it's some major publishing company is not publishing it, so that's why? Is that enough to call it fake? Why do we call that? So those sorts of things. I think there are various things that you need to consider. When you're publishing, you need to look at the impact factor. You need to look at what discipline does it cover. Is the board that is leading the journal, is that credible? And we'll look into all that information later on. But usually these journals are those that give you and say, well, we will publish your article in 3 days or in 1 week or in 2 weeks. And people get lured into it, especially many people where there is a pressure on publishing quickly for promotion or for other reasons. People do get trapped into that sort of thing. But what actually you do is you lose the work that you have done. And actually, it's bad for your reputation, because once it is published, you've paid the money to get it published. You've lost the work that you have published, and you've also tarnished your credibility, because when in a year or 2 years time, people are going to look into the stuff and they say, oh, well, so and so published in a predatory journal, which was not the right kind of thing. And that stain will stay there with you for the rest of your life. So therefore, it is really important to choose journals wisely when you are deciding to publish your work into and bring that out into the scientific community. So I hope this information was useful. I will stop. I think there is other stuff which is going to come to the next slide. And let me know, Sarah, where else you want me to be. Okay, so this one, I think we've talked about all of these 3 points really. What difference does the model of publishing make to my choices? So you have to see, do you have the money to pay for article processing charges? Or is your institution subscribed to a journal which allows you, or does your institution have an agreement with a publisher or a journal to allow you to publish open access without a charge on you? If that's the case, you can choose that model. If you don't have that option, that you don't have the money, and it's quite expensive, it's usually about £2,000 or $3,000 or something like that, and that's a lot of money. People don't usually have that kind of money. You shouldn't really be paying it out of your pocket anyway. So if you don't have that money, if you don't want to spend that money, don't do it. There are plenty of options where you can submit your articles into the journals, subscription only journals, and it's their job to publicize the information. As long as your science is good, the citation wise or other issues are not going to happen, and people will still be happy to read your work that you have done. And that's the most trusted model, which has worked for years and years and years, and hopefully it will work going forward as well. Choose between any of these 2 options, but avoid submitting your article to pseudo or predatory journals at any cost. If you want to get information to your audience in other ways, you could also kind of write a blog about what you have written in your article, put that onto different websites so people know some information about the research that you have done, some messages that you want to give, but then they also are able to connect back to the main article wherever it is published. And if they're interested enough, they'll be able to get a subscription, or they'll be able to connect with you and ask you for a copy that you can maybe privately sort of see if you can do it, or you could give them preprint copies that you already have. So there are various ways of dealing with that. But if you don't have the money, if the institution doesn't sign up to it, you don't need to pay for the publishing your article somewhere. So I hope that is clear. If you have any questions, keep on writing into the chat box or keep it with you and I'll be able to answer them.
That's lovely. Thank you, Parveen. So I'm going to take it into the sort of the practical realm in a minute or two. So there's lots of ways to hunt down suitable journals that are reputable and that will match your topic with the readers that you want to reach for your research. So I'll go through the options that kind of boil down into three basic groups, really. You can do it yourself, you can DIY, you can use publishers' specific tools, which unsurprisingly will herd you towards titles that are within that publisher's kind of house of journal titles, which is fine, but it isn't a whole, you're not looking at the whole market there. And there are a few independent journal finder tools. So I'm going to do some demonstrations on a variety of these, and I'm going to put some links into chat. So you'll just have to bear with me while I do a little bit of everything. And so if you want to kind of play along at home, if you like, then that's going to be absolutely fine. So the do-it-yourself approach. I mean, the biggest question is, what do you read? What journals are you interested in your topic area? And so that's the most obvious thing, try and approach those. If you're not so sure, then you can browse some of the big publishers' interfaces and look at the journal titles that they hold by subject, or you could use a product that looks across all kinds of journal titles. So if you're at Doncaster and Bassett Law, then you would be able to use a product like Browsing. And this is one, it's a little plug for our resources. We can have a look at that in a minute. It is essentially offering all of the full text access that's available to the NHS and to Doncaster and Bassett Law users. So I'll demonstrate that. It is a product on the web. You can look. You may not be able to get to the full text unless you have the right sort of authentication through an Athens account, but there's you can actually choose a library and just sort of browse its holdings. That's absolutely fine. You just don't get to read much full text, but we can have a look at that. If you're publishing and you have colleagues that are experienced authors, then ask them, where did they publish? What was their experience like? Was the, what was the process like? And get an idea of their recommendations. Or you could do really simply, you could look up your own kind of article topic in PubMed, in the publicly available version of Medline, and use its really straightforward functionality to get an overview of similar papers to yours, or one that's very like yours, and see where they've been published. So it's a pretty straightforward approach that. I'll visit Browsing just to show you what I mean by this one, and then we'll have a look at PubMed, and you can, if you're going to play along at home, this is a good place to go and find a title and an abstract that either you're interested in or reflects your research topic. So just bear with me a second, because I've got to dance about across the screens. Okay. So hopefully when Browsing loads, it'll allow me to search for a library, and I'm going to go for, oh, it's not picking me up. There we go. So I'm going to have a look at Doncaster's holdings, but you can do this. This is out there on the web. You're welcome to have a go. You can Google for browsing.com. It's a very straightforward URL. So this is a product that sort of sets out all of the topic areas. We'll have a look in nursing and allied health. We'll get some suggestions. Now then, just hide my thumbnails. Okay, so you can sort them here by A to Z, or you can sort them by journal rank, which is its impression of the reputation. And it's not exactly the same as impact factor, but you won't be surprised that the Lancet pops right to the top there when you're looking at ranking. So you can get an idea in the nursing and allied health field of, this is a broad title, so we could go a little bit more specific. Let's just look at nursing in its own right. Let's go with critical care nursing, just to have something to show you. So you can have a look at the titles, and it will give you some suggestions of where to go. And to be honest, that's all I'm using that for at the moment, is to show you a place that you can look at lots and lots of titles that are relevant to a very broad topic area. Now, this is very broad brush. This isn't about your specific research topic here, but it could give you a way in. Now, I'm going to go back to my presentation with a bit of luck and use it to visit PubMed, because there's stuff I want to show you on there. Now, this is another one that you can just Google for PubMed, and here you are. Now, I'm going to just bang some words in the search box here to pull up a selection of articles that, that you can use. I'm not going to use this much further down the line, but you can do this. So let's see, what am I interested in at the moment with some literature searching I've done. Oh, spell therapy, right? There's always the joy of a live type, isn't there? Okay, so I'm going to go with mirror therapy and stroke and see what I get. All I want to do is to pull up a particular article that I could then use in one of the journal finders to come. But PubMed has a really lovely facility. So once you found one article that you like, you should be able to find more. So that's one of its benefits. Let's go back a step and see what else we can find. Oh, that's more along the lines that I was hoping for. So let's have a look. So it's relatively recent. And what it ought to do is to give me options of similar articles. So once you find one with PubMed, you can acquire others. It's not a very finessed approach, but it is quite fast and quite helpful. So if you want something to use as an example, then do similar, have a look on PubMed, pick up an article, and then you'll have the title and abstract that you could paste into one of the journal finders in a minute. And you've got a basis for finding places that publish similar material to this, which is essentially the question that we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so the DIY approach can pay dividends. You can get a very large pool of journal titles to start pursuing, but there are other alternatives, as I've indicated. Some of these are independent in as much as they're searching across all sorts of publishing houses. They're not limited. Some are publisher-specific tools. So Elsevier, Wiley, Taylor and Francis, these are big publishers in the nursing and medical field. And so we'll have a look at a couple of these. I'm not going to explore every single one, you'll be relieved to know, but I'm going to give you some examples. So bear with me and I will pop this into chat so you can, oh joy, hang on just a second. I will pull it up out of the actual presentation and then I can copy it into chat for you. Okay, so if you want to have a look at this one, this is Jane. Looks like they strained a sinew there trying to get an acronym that made a word up. Come on, paste, please. Marvelous, that's not working. Okay, so I suggest that you Google for journal author name estimator Jane. It might come late into chat, but I haven't seen it go yet. There we go. So it's got a massive search box here, and that's because it's expecting you to put a title and an abstract in. Now I could use the mirror therapy one. I'd got a library one because I thought, well, we're going to have quite a mixed audience. Whatever article I pick, the chances of it being someone else's interest as well was absolutely microscopic. So I thought, well, do you know what? I might just bring one up that's interesting to me. And I think I might just do that. So I'm going to use one I've pre-prepared. So it's still within PubMed, but it's on library stuff. So why not? Librarian co-authors correlated with a higher quality reported search strategies in general internal medicine systematic reviews. So I'm getting a little message out there at the same time. I'm going to paste the title into Jane. And I'm also going back for the abstract. And that's as straightforward as it goes. I'm including the keywords that the author has included. So it's got an awful lot of data points in there from the title and the abstract that it's going to use to match articles that it's aware of in journals like that. So click on Find Journals. It has a little think. and then it presents results in quite a nice, easy to understand way. So it's very confident that the Journal of Medical Library Association will publish similar material to the article that I've told it I'm interested in. If I had written an article that I was wanting to publish, then obviously that would be the detail I'd put into Jane. And so it tells you various things about it. It's been judged as high quality open access journal. And I know that right up front from here, which is handy. And I can also see that it's indexed in Medline. So that's also a plus point. Plus one is another very high quality open access journal. That's really good to know. And you can see the variety of things that it's pulled up. It is not intelligent. It is doing some very basic word matching. It's essentially playing a game of snap with words that are in the title and the abstract of the article that you've given it, but it's really handy. It looks right across the publishing world, if you like, and makes suggestions of journals to visit. So it will show you the articles that it used in order to pick that journal, but that's, you know, only so interesting. What the most interesting thing is to look at the titles, make a note of them, and then hunt them down. So that's a really easy, quick way that you could use. So it's got a variety of things. They're not all open access. Some journals are, if it doesn't say open access, then you can assume that they are subscription based. It's got some platforms like F1000 Research. That's it's not a preprint server. It's not a journal as such. It's an open access platform. So you can visit some of these and check them out. So that is one of the independent tools that you can use. It's really quite straightforward, and none of them are more difficult than that, to be fair. I've included EndNote Web. Now this is it's a version of EndNote that's available on the internet. It's not a subscription product. You don't have to buy access to EndNote Web. It is just the free version of EndNote, but it has a really nice matching facility within it. So bear with me. I've got this pulled up somewhere handy. Okay, so I've already logged into my free account in EndNote Web. It's quite quick to do, but I'm not going to suggest you try setting your account up right now. But it's within this match option that you find the manuscript matcher details. So I'm going to go back to my library. It wants them separately, so I'm just going to pop the title into EndNote. And obviously, if I had researched in this field, it would be my own research details, my own abstract that I would be giving it. I'm pasting the title and the abstract in. Now, the extra bit of functionality that EndNote Web has is that if you had used EndNote Web to manage your citations for the article that you are writing, you can also pull on your references group, and it will add all of that data from the references. So I'm giving this as an example. I've got some search strategy stuff in EndNote Web, and it will use all of that data. So the title, the abstract, and the references that I've used, you know, essentially to write my article in order to do some matching. So I'm going to click on Find Journals and see what it offers. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a completely different set, because they look in different places and they use different stuff. So it's offering the best fit for my manuscript because it assumes I'm putting details about my research in there, and it gives you an enormous amount of detail about its journals. So it is looking in quite different places. This is a different set to the way Jane looked, but you've got a lot of information there. What it tries to do is to be super, super helpful and take you directly to where you would want to submit your article. But actually, this is slightly less than helpful because when you go to visit these links, it assumes you've already got an author account on the publisher's website, so it is not as helpful. It would be more useful to visit the journal homepage, which I think we will do for a couple of these. Let's have a look. That's as good as any. Okay, so we'll visit the journal homepage. I'll bring it up in another tab because, yeah. Ooh, that looks marvelous. Okay. Okay, I forgot to click I'm leaving their site. They really want to hang on to you. Now it should let me go there. Okay, so it's taken me to the home page of that journal. Now, I know that none of you are as interested in evidence-based library and information practice as I am, and that's fine. What I wanted to point out was that every journal homepage will have something similar. It has author guidelines, and these are like gold. They tell you exactly what you need to do. They tell you the kind of papers that this particular journal will accept. It may very well tell you what not to bother it with. So if it wants original research, it will tell you. If it doesn't mind a letter to the editor, it will tell you. The detail in the author guidelines, you absolutely have to read these. So I won't bore you with that, because if you're playing along and you've got a topic, you're probably exploring this as well. So author guidelines on the journal homepage is the best thing that you can look at. It will guide you to whether they want a manuscript that's double-spaced, how they want you to present any tables, how they're expecting you to format the citations and your references, and you need to match that. There is absolutely no point in, it's a little bit like applying for jobs. If you send your standard CV in and haven't tailored it to that specific job, you're really not going to get very far. You have to tailor your manuscript to the author guidelines, and they're very precise in the main. So that's a really useful place to look on each journal homepage. So if I go back to my presentation for a second. Okay, so the independent ones are looking everywhere. The ones that are linked to the main publishing houses are obviously going to be a little bit more contained. So they're not going to send you to a competitor, basically. So Elsevier will only look in journal titles belonging to Elsevier, the sort of stable of titles. So let's visit there. Okay. So on the Find Journals page, it's exactly the same thing. It wants title, it wants abstract, and it wants some keywords. So tell you what, I won't use the library example. I'll go to my kind of physio one. So let's have and my mirror therapy abstract is coming up. And then there's a separate place where you can pop keywords, and PubMed very kindly separates out the keywords from the rest of the abstract. So I'll put these in here as well. Okay, so it is not tricky. You can narrow down your field of research interesting. Where do we pop this? It's not a perfect match, is it? I'm going to go medicine, even though that's not absolutely perfect. I guess you could put 2 in there. We won't. Right, find journals. Come on, do the thing. Right, so it's found 49 journals potentially that might match. And it is looking in the right kind of places. So it gives you quite a lot of information about the journals that it's suggesting. You've obviously got the title of the journal, but it's showing you the impact factor. It's showing you the acceptance rate. So if that doesn't make you cry, then do press on. And you get some indication of the time it will take you to get your first decision. And as Parveen's told us earlier on, it can be an incredibly lengthy process. Time to publication here is close to a year, and that's just realistic. So the journal finder for Elsevier would take you through, so Archives of Physical Medicine and Rehab, positively speedy at 6 months there, and they have a slightly higher acceptance rate. So you get a feel with one of these, then they're able to show a little bit more detail, because obviously the publishing house owns these titles, so it knows these things. So this one is incredibly fast. I think we just might glide by that one. So some of these look like they would publish in a matter of weeks, and some of them are much, much slower. So you get an idea there. That Elsevier one is quite handy if a title that you're interested in sits within their with their stable, if you like. And you can filter. You can look for only open access, and you can look for subscription journals. So the Elsevier one is quite handy. if you're interested in Elsevier's journals. Now, I think it should be possible to go to my original document and put some of these in chat in a moment, even though I wasn't able to copy and paste in there earlier on. Wiley is another gigantic publishing house for medicine. So I'll have a little look at that one too. Okay, and you know the drill now, the title, the abstract, and the details. So just to give you, this is the last one I'm going to demo. I'm not going to go with Taylor and Francis as well. Let's get the whole of that. There's something different to tell you about Taylor and Francis, you'll be relieved to know. Okay, so title and abstract in, find. As I say, these are not tricky to use. And then another completely different set, because these are Wiley journals. So it's giving you, whether they're open access or subscription, you've got a lot of suggestions for appropriate journals, which are absolutely right, where you would expect to find articles on that very specific mirror therapy and stroke rehab topic. Okay, so they're as simple as that to use. I'm going to come back here. So Taylor and Francis have an identical journal. They call it a journal suggester rather than a journal finder. And that's really one of the very few kind of differences between them. But I mentioned Taylor and Francis because they've got a lovely set of resources that they make available to any potential authors. And when I stop talking in a minute, there's going to be an awful lot of things I'm going to paste into chat that might work. I'm going to send a copy of this presentation out to everyone who registered for the session. So you'll have the links there. And I also include the link to the Taylor and Francis. They call them ebooks. I think that's a bit grand. They look like PDFs to me, about choosing journals, about the writing process, about peer review. There is all sorts of material that they make available for free in their author pages. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to paste the links in, but these are Googleable. And so you hopefully will have had a chance to play along. I'm going to move on now, and this is where hopefully Parveen, if you're going to pick up where I've left off.
Yeah, sure. And because do you mind clicking on the link and I can go, because it's shared from your place, so I can't.
Of course, yeah, sure.
So basically, how do you actually, we talked about predatory journals, and we talked about how do you choose the best journals, and Sarah has given you advice about how do you match your abstracts and your titles to the specific journals where you want to publish. One thing you need to understand is that there's no human being sitting at the back, and the computer doesn't have the brain. Okay, so all it does is, as we've said, that it picks up the words in your abstract, in your title, and matches it to things which are published already in that sort of stuff. So it may not always be very accurate. So you still have to use your brain to kind of decide and make decisions. So it is a little bit like you do spell check on your Microsoft Word for any document. And sometimes you all must have come to situations where it gives you an option grammatically or spelling wise, and you think, no, that's not what I want to say here, because that changes the structure of the sentence. And so you have to make your own decision. And sometimes you have to ignore the suggestions being given to you. And similar is when it comes to doing it. But the few things that you could do when you're trying to check on the journal. So there is, you can see on this page, they provide you with a checklist, and you could also download that checklist. So here's a download checklist template. So you know, if that helps you to try and see what it is. But usually I think the things are fine here. So when you're submitting your, trying to see if you're submitting your research to a trusted journal, how do you actually do that? So we talked about predatory journals, we talked about, and I did say some ethical issues around like what a journal is predatory. So I think these questions allow you to see some of those aspects, because chances are either you will be publishing to an international journal, or you will be publishing to a magazine or something which is more local or more national in the countries wherever you're working. If that's the case, you will know, chances are you will know people and you will be able to kind of, identify some of the aspects about those people. But if it's international journal, how do you actually do that? So can we go a little bit down? So check. So first of all, do you or your colleagues know the journal? Have you seen the journal? So when we are students, when we are writing assignments, we are teaching, when we are reading assignments from students, there are specific journals that people have used it. So like, for example, BMC Public Health, Lancet. There are other names like that, Violence Against Women, Journal of Interpersonal Violence, Trauma, Violence and Abuse, Journal of Clinical Nursing, Journal of Advanced Nursing. So these are the names that you already know, and you may have read information around there. So have you read any of the articles in that journal before? Is that journal easier to discover, easier to find out? Is it easy to discover the latest papers that are published in journals? So usually many journals would have all journals have a landing page where they give you most recent papers, even the papers who are early published in their early version. So those are there, and which are not kind of assigned to a copy of the journal as yet. So you can see, can you access those articles before? Does the name of the journal vary? Is it unique, or can you confuse it with any other journal? So these days, you will find some journals with very similar names. Usually, if it's coming from a reputed publisher, they try and have a little bit of difference so that the name is unique. But some of the predatory website and predatory journals have used exactly the same kind of name, exactly the same kind of website, so it can easily confuse people into submitting it. Okay, can you cross-check with information about the journal on ISSN portal? So this is a portal which tells you about the registration of the journal, so that can give you some information, but I don't think many people would do that. But some of the, if you could do few things, I think that would help. You can always go to this portal and check what is it. Can you see who the publisher is? Is that publisher name? So there are usually many different publishers. So within the healthcare, I think there are 5 or 6 main publishers. Do you want to tell their names, Sarah?
I think we're probably talking about Wiley, Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis, Sage. I think that's probably.
Yeah, these are the main publishers, and you will find their stuff published around them. But then there may also be university-led, so White Rose related something, or University of Bristol or something like that. Some journals are like that too. So you need to see if the publisher is, can you identify the publisher? Is the name and other information is clearly provided on the website? Can you contact them? Can you via email, telephone, post, or anything like that? Do they tell you clearly about what the process of peer review is? Do they clearly tell you? Usually these days you can even go to a journal and they tell you how long does it take for them to peer review, how long does it take for them to publish an article, and all that information. So you could even compare those sorts of things these days. How many reviewers per paper? So they tell you if it's more than, usually most journals would have at least 2 reviewers who are going to review your manuscript in it, and then it's the editor, associate editors, a few more people. Is the publisher offering a review by an expert editorial board or by researchers in your subject area? So this is something, usually peer review is done by researchers in your field, as it says peer reviewers. So it's not only the editorial board members. Most journals sometimes use editorial board members, but they don't depend on it. And editorial board members act as peer reviewers like other peer reviewers as well. So there's always an effort to try and get a bigger pool of people from various different backgrounds who can tell you what it is. Only so if in situations where So for instance, I'm an editor and I've sent an article for a review to 2 reviewers, and both of them, one says reject, the other says accept, and I'm like, my God, what do I do with that? So I'll go through and read this thing, and if it's completely contradictory, I'll be able to find another reviewer, send it to them, and get independent advice. That reviewer may be from the editorial board or otherwise, but I would not solely depend on the editorial board members to review all the articles which gets published into it, not because of their ability or anything, but because of the sheer volume of the work, which is going to cause trouble for them. So that information tells you how bigger the pool is, and do they get is it worth submitting to that journal? Are article indexed or archived in dedicated services? Will your work be indexed or archived and easily discoverable in databases such as PubMed, so Google Scholar? Google Scholar actually does it for anything and everything that publishes. PubMed, for example, or Scopus or Sinhal, or those kind of databases, where is the journal associated with those databases, indexed in those databases, which then means that your article would be available in those databases as well. Does the publisher ensure long-term archiving and preservation of digital publication? Can you, I think the easier way to explore this is how far can you go back to find an article? And these days you could even look for an article which was published in, I don't know, 1980, 1990, something like that, even before the print versions, the digital versions were available. But how far can you go back to find the digital version of the article? And that tells you something about it. Does the publisher uses permanent digital identifier, so DOI number, is that available for your articles? And that's one of the indications. Is it clear what fees will be charged? So do they tell you, like, how much are they going to charge? What is it for? And do they tell you how they are financially supported? Is that a society journal, for example, the International Nursing Review, which is a Wiley based and official journal of International Council of Nurses. The Journal of International Nursing Scholarship is supported by Sigma, for instance. There are medical journals which are from different medical associations. So, trying to figure out all that information would also help. Does the publisher website explain whether or not waivers are available? Like if you were going to apply for open access publishing, do they tell you, can you get some waivers and how can you get those waivers and stuff like that? Are the guidelines provided for authors on the publisher website as to how you're going to submit? Author guidelines are available. Do they tell you about the licensing policy? Do they tell you about kind of what exceptions are permitted depending on the needs of the author? Can you copy some of the information over there? What would be the copyright related information around that? Does the publisher have a clear policy regarding potential conflict of interest for authors, editors, and reviewers? Do they tell you, like for example, my journal tells you that if I were to submit an article in that journal, how is that going to be treated? It treated similar way as for any other article submitted by any other person in the journal. The difference would be that if any of you submit or somebody submits an article to my journal, I'm the first one to once it goes through all different processes, I'm the first one to be able to allocate it to other people and see that. But if it's my article, I would not be involved in any of that processes, and it will be done independently, and I would be treated as like any other author, where it goes for review. I don't know who the reviewers are. I'll get it back, the feedback, and I'll have to do all those things that an author is expected to do. So is that information clearly articulated on the website? Is the publisher a member of recognized industry initiative? Can we go a little bit down, please? So do they belong to community of COPE, so community of publication ethics, which is most journals belong to, which then means they sign up to certain standards that they need to abide by? If it's an open access publishing, is it listed in the directory of open access journal? And there are different questions in that list that you can have a look and see, what do you think about it? And you could even tick these kind of, various different options and submit, and it will tell you an answer that is that a predatory or is that a reliable journal. But I think once you have done this exercise a couple of times, then you will know what question to ask yourself anyway. So there are resources available that would allow you, or that would help you understand or make better decisions when it comes to identifying appropriate journals. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Parveen. I'm not going to go through the rest of these because they're linked to from the Think Check Submit.
They're pretty much similar, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just different places that you might look. And, you know, I'm aware that you might be thinking, good grief, I thought I was just going to pick one. I didn't think I actually had to critically appraise my journal, but it is really important. So I'm going to try putting stuff in chat in a minute, which has been quite tricky whilst I'm screen sharing. So I think since our next slide is that one, I will stop screen sharing and start putting useful links in chat, including the feedback survey, which we really appreciate it if you would fill in. We would love to get your thoughts on today's session, and that will allow us also to have a look in chat and make sure we've met your expectations. So I will hand over to Parveen for any questions whilst I do some frantic copying and pasting into chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So what we can now do is open the floor for questions. So because I've muted you all, I'll be able to unmute you if you raise your hand and if I know who the person is, and you can ask your question, but at the same time, you can just write in the chat if you wanted to ask question by writing it. So yeah, so any questions? So let me give you the ability. Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself if you wanted to ask a question, but raise your hand so we don't have two people speaking at the same time.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, as I asked earlier, how we can differentiate between a true journal or a predator journal?
Okay, fine. Okay, let me go back to the start of the thing and see if there are any questions. So how do you, okay, as I said during the discussion, there are various ways of identifying. If a journal promises you to publish your article within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's just not possible. It usually takes at least about 6 months to publish an article, even if your article was that excellent that the editor decides to publish on the first look. Even then, it's going to take at least about 3 months or so, because what the editor would look into it, read through it, and if that's accepted, then even then it has to go through the copyright and all the rest of the procedure to be able to get to the final stages of the acceptance. Even that is going to take, so never ever your article is going to be published in 3 days, 4 days, or 2 weeks, or 3 weeks time. The other thing is that look at the information, as we have just said about the information on the checklist about different journals. Is the name available on, does the name look very similar to other journals? Can you recognize the journal? What the editorial board looks like? You find these days there are journals which says environmental science and psychology. Now you just think, well, what's the relationship between these two things? Or environmental something engineering and something else. And you just think, well, it doesn't really make sense. These are two different disciplines. Why would you do a journal which copes with both of those things? So I think some of those questions, and the other thing which you can do, and even I do and I've done all my life, is that if you are not sure, ask your colleagues, ask your mentor, your supervisor, people you're working with, ask somebody and they'll be able to tell you, and then make your decision like that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody, any other questions? So there is a hand, and whose is it? Dr. Naseem.
Yes, thank you so much, Parveen. And Sarah, I really appreciate, it's really very informative webinar for me to learn more on, because there are so many questions that you people already answered. So I just wanted to know the one thing that we are going to pay, when we are talking about the open access journals and when we are talking about the subscribed journals, right? So how do I know? At times I feel this difficulty that the journal who are asking payment for publication is the worthy journal, or the journal they are asking free of charges are the worthy journals to approach and publish our work.
As long as the journal is not predatory, or as long as the journal is credible, has been there for some time, and you have done various different checks, it doesn't matter if they are open access or if they are not. If you have money in the funding budget or something like, with your research element, you can choose to publish in open access, that's fine. But otherwise, all these steps where, how do you identify journals? So once you've identified 2 or 3 journals to publish your work, then what you could do is you could do individual searches for all those 3 journals, which publisher is publishing it, what kind of thing journal publishes. So just do a little bit of research around that. And I don't think being able to pay for the article processing charges should be a factor in deciding where should you submit. If you have the money, then go for the open access publishing. If you don't, there are many journals who are still working on the subscription kind of model. If you if you're still not sure, asking your senior colleagues. It's always safe to publish in journals that you have been reading. So any articles, when you're writing an article, you must have used other articles to write the introduction, background, and other information there. So have a look at those journals and publish in one of those journals. Ask the librarian in the institutions that you're working. Ask any other colleagues, like for example, if you're in DBTH, ask me, ask Sarah, ask somebody else, and we'll be able to help and support you with those questions. Ask question, basically. If you're in university, again, asking a librarian would help. I think services differ depending on which country and which place you are in, but basically it is about asking people, asking the right question. And because if you come back and tell me, oh, well, I've written this article, can you please read, and can you please tell me how to publish in which journal, and do this, I might not have the time to do all of that. But if you ask me, well, this is the article for this journal or your journal or XYZ, do you think it's appropriate, or how should, so then people can channelize your query and give you the right kind of answer, which will help you. Does that help, Naseem?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? There is one more hand. Okay, so Naseem's hand. Did you want to ask something, or is it a previous hand? Okay, no. All right then. Any other questions? Comments? Would you tell us if the session was useful? Did you find it useful?
Thank you so much. This is a very informative session for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. Would you be able to write? Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Latif. Any questions, I'll be able to answer that. We will put our email addresses here to be for you to see if you need to connect with us. And I'll be grateful if you take 2 minutes of your time to answer the feedback survey before going off. Sarah has already shared a link in the chat box. Do you want to share it again, Sarah?
I will.
Yes, the recording will be available. It wasn't letting me post on the YouTube channel straight away, so it's gone on Facebook. Like what I will also do is put the recording on the YouTube and send a link to all those who are registered for this webinar today, so they have it.
That's looking good in the chat there, Parveen. So
excellent.
We'll just take 2 minutes to flesh out our feedback survey. We will be able to evaluate our sessions as a kind of a whole product. Then it's really helpful for us if you can put something into our surveys. It will help us evaluate and then make them better, change them, add to them, and then run them again.
And also it helps us see that, is somebody actually finding it useful? Because otherwise it just feels like, we spend a lot of time and effort organizing this, doing this in our own time and everything else. And then you feel like if nobody's benefiting from it, then what's the point of doing it? Which is not really useful, but anyway. So if you have got any comments, anything, then please do give us some feedback. And there's a comment on the Facebook which says excellent session. Thank you so much. So those who are on Facebook as well, if you want to have any questions, if you just post here, we'll be able to answer that.
Okay, I'm going to put a link in to the sign up for all of the sessions that are in this series of writing for publication. So bear with me just a second, don't vanish before I am able to do that for you. We have a writing for publication page within our wider library website. So I never mind driving a bit of traffic towards that. So I'm putting our writing for publication page, which has got the sign up links, but please do have a browse. If there's something else on the wider supporting research pages that's valuable for you, then please do have a look. It's out there on the web and it's meant to be useful. Okay, so I'm going to send a copy of the presentation with all of the links in it and a link to the recording when that's available and another chance to do our feedback survey because I'm persistent if nothing else. And I will send that to everyone who registered for the session. Is there anything else we need to do, Parveen, or are we about?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Do you see if people have responded to the survey? Do you need to give a few more minutes or are we okay?
I can log in and have a look. I will be nosy. Hang on.
While Sarah is looking into it, one thing always remember when you're trying to write for any for publication, choose your journal first. Always choose your journal first and then write for it. If the the other approach where you might want to write your article first and then choose the journal doesn't always work. So therefore, it's always worth finding the right kind of journal to start off with, and then writing your article, because then that increases your chances of writing something which would be acceptable to the journal.
We've got 6 people who've been kind enough to fill in our survey so
Come
far.
on, everyone. We've got 25
people on the call. So
it won't take more than 2 minutes, I think.
no, it's very quick. It's all tick, tick, tick. You don't have to type very much at all. So please humor us.
Thank you.
Ooh, gone up to 8. We've been successfully bullying them into completing it. I mean, this is going well. Okay. So we have a few more minutes now. If there are any other questions, we'll be very happy to help you. And we will just keep on going. Please fill in the survey whilst you're still on the call.
Okay. Could you also tell us by maybe raising your hands or thumbs up or something, how many people here in this call are from DBTH? Just raise your hand or write in the chat box or whatever is easier.
Hi, Jenny.
Jenny, yeah. Yeah. And this is just to ask so that, what is it that we are doing or what is it which we can do to make these more accessible? I think one of the things is that people like to watch recording later on. So people do register, but then think, okay, fine, we'll be able to watch recordings. So that could be one of the factors, but it's just good to know. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for joining us today. And we, as Sarah said, we will send you the link and just take it on from there. Dr. Latif, I'm just curious, what is Calorie Hacker?
Excuse me, ma'am, it's a nutrition and public health based organization. And I'm working with them as public health consultant.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's try one more thing. How many of you are, I think most of you are healthcare professionals, right? How many of you are nurses? Just raise your hand or something. How many of you are medics? How many of you are public health professionals? Or allied health professionals? Okay, and because you came from various different diverse backgrounds, did you find the information and the examples still useful for yourself? Thumbs up or hands up or whatever. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us and have a very good day.
Are you okay to stop the recording, Parveen?
Yeah.